Good evening, everyone. Very warm welcome to our Open Eco Homes programme this evening. Our talk is about a phased DIY retrofit of a 1905 built house. Over to Martin.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. My name is Martin Roach. I live on Hills Road, 253 Hills Road, just near the Perth School. And in front of you, will see the cold drafty edifice that we bought back in 2002. So we've been there about 20 years now. It's a semi-detached, as you'll see, 1905 Edwardian house. And one of the aims when moving into this house was try and make it comfortable and eventually try and make it much lower carbon in its impact. So I'm going to be explaining some of the work we've done. While we're just on this slide, I'll point to the top right-hand corner of the house where you'll see a brown window. And that's just an indication of work that was ongoing at this time, which I'll talk about. Where the window was removed and work was done. But so just to show that work was done on the house, and now I'll explain you some of the steps that we took. So when we inherited the house or bought the house, there was a lot of work there's basic work that anybody would really do going into a house. We put more insulation into the loft. A lot of the windows windowsills were a bit rotten, so part of my work has been to try and just keep on top of those because it was lovely oak, but hadn't been looked after. So a lot of painting had gone on, draft sealing the windows and the doors and things like that. But and we replaced the boiler. But most of those are just basic things that any householder would want to get on top of. The other major things is I undertook secondary glazing on the house in 2007. And if you look to the left-hand side of this slide, you'll see it was a magnetic glazing I put on. So this is actually our current front door, which still has it. And I've moved the pane just so you can see the white metal strip that is attached to the door. And then the magnetic strip is applied to the Perspex overlay. And that fits snugly. And it works, but it doesn't really seal anything. It's, I'd say it's probably got a U value of something like 5 or something like that. So it helped, but it wasn't really the solution we wanted. The other major step I undertook was I insulated under the floors in probably around about now 75 to 80% of the ground floor. So that required, in this case, I took the view of taking up the old pine floorboards and laying down oak engineered boards. But before doing that, I insulated underneath by netting that was hung from the joists, stapled to the joist. The insulation was then rolled in, put in, and you'll see a little bit of the insulation we used there, but obviously it was much thicker than that. And then the floorboards, then bitumen strips were put along the joists themselves so that when you screw down through the floorboards, you get a seal through the bitumen as well. So trying to just make sure the energy wasn't leaking out of the floorboards. And that took us really to around about just a couple of years ago, 2021, when we'd had all this work done. And one of the comments my wife made is that when you put the thermostat on, it actually reached the temperature that you wanted to achieve, which just showed you that it was still a pretty leaky house, and the boiler itself wasn't able to get it up to what we felt was a comfortable temperature. But anyway, progress was being made. And the reason I mention that is you might have your own individual reasons why you want to do work on your house. It could be energy bills, it could be lowering the carbon footprint, or it could be comfort. It doesn't really matter as long as you have your motivation and you get on with it. So this was the early work done. But at that stage, I wanted a plan. I like to know, let's look forward 3, 4, 5 years. What do I want to do on the house? And can we break that down into steps that will get us to where we want to be? And where we want to be is zero carbon in terms of our heating. So that's going to necessitate moving to renewable electricity and a heat pump down the line. But this was too much for me to get my head around myself. So what I did is I went to a company called EcoFurb, and they came in, they did a survey of the house, and they had various computer systems where they can select the best options for you. And they came out with a plan for us. And that cost around about £350, but was well worth it in terms of it just set me going forward about the steps we needed to do. So they produced this plan, and on the next slide, what you'll see is the three stages that they had shown. If you see the phases, as they call them, they explained where we are now, and back in those wonderful days, our fuel bill was only £1,240. You'll see from the green bar, the green column. Clearly much higher now, unfortunately. But what they did is they showed the work that they suggested doing. It's not shown here, but phase one was window replacement they wanted to do and double glazing. Phase two was insulation of the fabric of the house, the walls, etc., external and internal. And then phase three was going to be mechanically heat recovery, ventilation, and also an air source heat pump. So that's where those cost estimates come in. And then it showed the impact in terms of energy rating, as you'll see, the fuel bill. And so from this, we could get around about halving our fuel bill. Then obviously the carbon savings were far greater because we're moving to air source heat pumps. One thing I'll say at this stage is that when you get estimates on like this, take them with a pinch of salt. It's always going to be higher. So, and I can go into some of the costs that we had. But anyway, it gave me a plan. Okay, so the first stage was going to be the windows. And as I've described it here, the window problem. So you'll see the state of some of these windows. Now, these windows, I painted the whole of the house in 2010. All of these windows were lovely back then. The sun coming around the front of the house really bakes it, and you know, you get differential expansion of the wood or the filler that's been put in and things. So, you know, as you can see, they were the worse for wear. Now, their plan was to rip out all these windows, put in new double glazing, and that was going to supposedly solve that problem. These windows were 120 years old, and I know some of them look a bit knocked around, but I didn't want to lose them. So my intention was, how could I refurbish these windows, upgrade them to modern standards, and therefore, I mean, maybe save some money at the same time, but not throw away this wood that was, a lot of it is beautiful new wood. These are the worst examples I'm showing here. And also I wanted the insulation to be really good. So I looked around and we went for vacuum insulation, which I'll talk about now. Now, so what this entailed was taking out the glass and making sure the windows were able to take the weight of the vacuum insulation, because for those who are not aware, and I'll show you an example later on, the vacuum glazing is basically two panes of glass, and instead of a gas in between, it's got a vacuum in between and a very narrow space, 0.7 mils between the two panes of glass, which means it's very thin. So therefore, I could install it in these windows without having to dramatically change the windows themselves, but the weight was still there. So I had to make sure the windows themselves were able to carry this weight. So the next slide shows you some of the tools and that were required. By the way, I'll just jump in here and say, if anybody wants more information on any of this, if you want to contact me directly after the talk or in days ahead, feel free to do so. And even if you decide you want to move to doing some of these things, I'll happily come round and advise. So please don't think that it needs to stop at the end of this presentation. So I just show some of the tools involved. It was a big job. So far I've replaced the windows on the front of the house, and I'm now just about to move to installing on the side of the house. But you know, it's rubbing the paint off, which is shown by the angle grinder. It's trimming some of the wood on it, as you'll see with these tools. And also there's a nail gun there. And there's two things I was doing, not only installing the new glazing, which was called Finio 8, which is the vacuum glazing. The 8 signifies that it's just about 8 mils thick, 4 mils of glass, 3 mils of glass, and a 0.7 in the middle. And these are some of the things I've used. The glue for another stage. Sorry, I'm not explaining this too well. The other thing, besides the glass, I was also cladding the windows, and that is a way of, if you put thin, very, how can I say, Tricoya is a very water impenetrable wood type of substance, and I put this on the front of the windows. It gave me extra depth in the reveals to be able to put in these slightly wider windows, but also it means that I'm future-proofing the house so that I'm not going to get the rot that you've seen before. So these are just some of the accessories, the glue. I had to rehinge them. I had to strengthen them with the metal plate you'll see there. And I had to use the pins for applying the Tricoya. Let's move on to the next one and I'll show you what this means in practice. So, okay, what we've got here, top right, we've got a picture of various panes of the Finio 8 vacuum glazing. You'll see there, as I said, it's got a thickness of 7.7 mils. The U value is very low, 0.7. That's taken it below double glazing, and it's equivalent to triple glazing. So it's a very efficient glass, even though it's so thin. And there's, as you can see, there's several panes that have been lined up there. The bottom right shows actually a gable end, which I clad in this Tricoya that I was talking about. And my aim here, because I'm trying to future-proof it, I never want to go up a ladder again if I can. So wherever there were significant wooden surfaces, I clad them in this Tricoya. And hopefully you'll get an idea there of the thinness of it and the fact it comes in sheets and it is water impenetrable. So once you've painted this, you're not going to get the water getting in, and therefore you're not going to get the expansion which is causing the cracking of the paint. If you look to the left-hand side, you'll see a window that's been done, the one with the white one, and then the one next to it is one where you can see the cladding that's been put on, and that's obviously before it's been painted or it's been where the cracks have been caulked. So what it does is it means the window looks, when it has been painted, it's looked just like a modern window would look. It's got nice sharp edges to it. It's impenetrable to the elements. And therefore, hopefully this window will last another 50 years at least without having to have work done on it. So that's what the end result looks like. Okay, so moving on to the next one.
Okay, thank you, Martin. We're going to take just a short pause now so that we can look at any questions which arise from Martin's presentation of the sort of stage 1 work. And we've already had a small number of questions come in on the chat, and just like to see if we can tackle those now. We won't spend a lot of time because there will be quite a substantial period of questions and answers after Martin has finished his talk, the whole talk, and I do encourage you to keep on putting questions in the chat, and we'll tackle as many as we can when we get to the end of Martin's talk in the rest of the hour. Can I just, the questions we've had so far, can I ask please Brian Simpson to just put his question? Don't forget to unmute when you speak.
Thank you very much. I just wondered, when you were talking about the front door and the magnetic double glazing, can you just tell us a bit more about how you decided that that was inadequate? What was it? How, in what ways was it not sufficient?
Several reasons. One is just aesthetics. Obviously, maybe a trivial one, but they look fairly good, but they look like you know, Martin Roach had done them rather than they were quality job, let's say. They leak. The U value I'd say is around about 5, and as you heard, it's about 0.7 for the windows we've put in. So although secondary glazing is a good step, I don't think it wouldn't have got the house to the level of insulation that we wanted to be able to then have an effective air source heat pump. Given that we were going to refurbish the window frames themselves, it was a good step, a good time to do the actual installation of the vacuum glazing as well. So several factors led us to that change.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. There's a related question just come in from Michael Upsall, and he's just checking that you could have got, if you'd chosen an external supplier to do the windows instead of doing them yourself. He's just interested in checking that with you.
Okay. Sorry, whether I had what I did is I ordered the glass from Finio, but you have to go through a distributor. I used, finally identified a company just the other side of Fulbourn, and they were kind enough to order them for me. It's not their main business. Their main business is actually making and installing windows, but they were very good because I did some of the windows. I did a lot of the work on the outside, the cladding, but they've got expertise in, for instance, the putty work. It's not putty anymore. It's sort of high-tech caulk that they use. But what I will do for the second stage, as an example, is all the windows that are removable, I'll send off to them, and they will be able to refurbish them for me, send them back, and then I can install them. So yes, there is a company. Christian Ward Thomas is the guy's name. I think the link might have been put in the profile for this presentation, but I can give the content there. By the way, the comment earlier about secondary glazing, I don't want to undermine secondary glazing. We had 10 years of or more of secondary glazing, and it's been very good. So, and I've installed secondary glazing probably on about 15 houses. So I believe in it as a first step, and it can last for 20 years. So please don't not do it just because I've moved on to something else. It can be very valuable.
Okay, thank you. And then perhaps a final question for this pause. Lionel Gousset has a couple of questions. I think you've already answered one of them about the U value of the vacuum windows, but could Lionel come in and ask his question, please?
Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Martin. Very, very interesting. Yes, you're right, Martin. You're right. Sorry, Chris. That U value. Martin has answered that question already. My other question, Martin, was about EcoFurb. I had a look on their website, and it looks like my property. It says that my property is not served under the scheme. So I was wondering if you know of other of an alternative to EcoFurb that I could use potentially.
Okay, EcoFurb just once in their evolution, they kind of came into the Cambridge market, and I think they've drawn back a bit now because it was almost a step too far in terms of trying to manage staff in this area. So I have heard of one or two, and I'll try and dig out the contacts of people, local people who can help you in this. The other thing I'd say, if EcoFurb have given me permission to share the plan for our house, and it's got quite a bit of detail in the report that they sent. So it might be useful if you look at that and see if any of that is applicable to your house. As you'll see from the phases, the phases themselves are pretty self-evident. You seal the windows, you insulate the walls, and then you move on to ventilation and the heat pump. So it's not rocket science. It's just having something that's slightly tailored to your house. But I'll happily share those two things with you: the contacts and the plan.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Martin.
Okay, fine. So time for us, I think, now to move on to the second part of Martin's presentation. As before, I would encourage you to put your questions into the chat, and we'll try and tackle as many as possible at the end of Martin's talk. Martin.
Okay, just to finish off on the phase one, as we call it, put some cost to this, which might be helpful to you. In our house, on the front of the house, which is the part that we've done so far, there are 48 panes of glass. these cost us, and these were purchased in euros, so I'm not sure how the exchange rate has changed, but those cost us around about £8,000 for those panes of glass. And by the time we'd done other things, like I'd got the glazier to put them in, etc., we'd had scaffolding put up, that took the cost, I calculate, up to about £16,000. To get that done by another company like, say, Sashcraft or Chameleon is another one that operates in this in Cambridge. I reckon that would have, well, I know it would have costed about £50,000. So, you know, beyond maybe the reach of what a lot of people are able to pay. So just to say, you know, you can reduce the cost by 2/3 by undertaking it if you have the interest and the ability. But and then again, I can advise on that. Okay, stage 2, phase 2 as they call it, was the actual exterior walls and to a certain extent the interior walls. What our objectives were with the house is to not change the frontal look of the house substantially, or the rear view of the house. The side view of the house that you can see here, which has the television aerial sticking to it, we weren't so bothered about. Nobody kind of looks down the side of the house. So we wanted to retain the render and brick and wood appearance on the front. And you'll see on this on the back of the house, it's a bit higgledy-piggledy in terms of the windows that have been installed over the years, but we didn't want to change that look either. So that determined to a certain extent how we went about the installation. So what we did here was go to a company Strata, who's a local company, and they have just today took down the scaffolding. So the work has been done, and what we're looking at here is before the work was started. And over the next few slides, we'll just show you what entailed to undertake this work. So, okay, a few things. When you're having an external insulation put on, the roof, obviously what you're doing is you're building out by about 100 mils of depth on the side of the house. So when you come up to the roof line, you need to do something to the roof to extend it as well. Now, it's probably difficult to see here, but there's two sorts of gables on our house. One is kind of flush with the wall, and one, like you'll see on the right-hand side, excuse the scaffolding that I've taken the picture through, but what you're looking up as, the wall on the left-hand side, you can just see the orange bricks, and then you can see the overhang of the soffits at the top. And that exactly, and then you can see the rendering above the brickwork. So what this meant is we didn't have to do anything to that roof line, because the insulation would fit snugly within that. On the left-hand picture, we had to extend the roof so that the tiles, etc., would go beyond the insulation. And if you can just see on that picture, you see the scaffolding poles, and then above it, you can see some 2x6s by the looks of it of wood, and that's really where they've extended the gable end, which comes out towards us, but also they're extending the wall on the side, so that the roof on the side, so that it will overlap the insulation. So all I'm flagging here is, you know, if you get a cost for doing external insulation, don't forget there's also whatever you're going to do with the roof. We got in a roofer to do this work. We could have had PVC extensions put on underneath the tiles, but our aim again was just to try and retain the look and the structure of the house as it was. So step 1 of preparation. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll see some of the preparatory work as well. You know, there's a lot of things you don't realize until you start to look at walls that hang on walls. So there's obviously drain pipes, there's the tap at the back of the house for the garden. This is the right-hand slide picture here shows the remains of the lighting that was on the side of the house. So that had to come off. There at the bottom of the picture, you'll see the extension to the boiler flue coming out of the house, and then obviously the sewerage and water pipes as well. So all of these are taken at least 4 inches, 100 mils away from the house to be ready for the insulation to go in behind it. So that work's done first. Then along comes the insulation. Bottom left-hand side, you'll see it's very bulky, so it sits somewhere or other, and there it is, ready to go. You'll see the other pictures where they've started to install it down the side of the house. And then I've showed as well on the left-hand side a reveal. More insulation of a thinner type was put in to go back to the windows so that we're not cold bridging across the bricks. That insulation had to be thinner because there wasn't much frame depth to play with. So they put a sort of a higher quality insulation back there. We could have gone for different types of insulation. You know, some people will go with natural fibers. We could have gone with Kingspan EPS, I think it's called. In the end, we went for this, which is a graphite infused EPS, expanded polystyrene. So this is kind of one step up on normal polystyrene. And the Kingspan one we were going to go with, but the issue with that is that the installer said he's done many a house where he put those on, and they need to cure those big sheets. And if they're not properly cured, even when render's put on, after a few years, you start to see the lines where the sheets join. So he might have had another interest for why we went this way, but he was certainly convincing. So we decided to go with this one. And the final picture on the right-hand side is stay on top of any installation work that's been done. This is showing a pipe coming out of the side of the house and the insulation that's had the base coat render before the top coat's put on. And my brother, who lives with us, came out and said, we've got a leak. And what had happened is they hadn't joined the pipe up correctly when they extended it. Now, you know, luckily we caught it, because if you then put the top coat on, you might never see that water, and you don't know where it's going to go if it had continued and not been caught. We caught it, and you know, it's not a problem now. What I'm saying is it's in your interest as well as a builder to make sure that it's been done to the standard that you're happy with. So anyway, insulation was done. And now what I would call the finishing. What you're looking at here is, if you look at the middle slide, is probably a good one to look at. You'll see the base coat on the rendering at the bottom, and then the top coat, they've actually put on the final finish rendering. And the reason we've kept the base coat as it is we're going to apply brick slips, which you'll see in the slide next to it, which are the very thin slips of brick. And they're going to be put on there and mortared to recreate the brick effect that we had before. So this is me just measuring up for where the brick slips will go. But so the brick slips arrived today. They cost me around about £1,500, and then got to obviously install them. But given that, you know, the work we're doing now is going to have a benefit for, like I say, 50, 100 years, we thought, you know, that is worth paying to make sure to have a house that we're proud of the look of and hasn't changed significantly. So we're putting brick slips on. We could have continued the insulation all the way down the bottom, just like we did at the side. And maybe people who came afterwards wouldn't even notice the change, but we did. So anyway, it really is the final stage. When we put on those brick slips, we'll have done phase 2. So, right. And finally, what I wanted to do is just to flag some other things that you might consider when you're trying to get your house to the insulation standard that you'd like. First of all, I would say when you're painting, whether you're painting windows, anything that's got wood on it, is to go for a flexible paint. More and more paints are described as flexible these days. We went for a finish paint called Tricoya that's available on the UK market. And my argument was, hey, if this is a paint that can stand finish winters and finish summers, then that's a step worth taking. Sorry, can we just go back to the other slide? Because it'll just help me point out. Okay, a stupid thing, but something worth looking at. So we spend all this money insulating an exterior wall, and about 4 years ago we had our kitchen extended. And what you're seeing here is the looking out towards the garden and the wall that we share with our neighbours. To cut a long story short, when they when they finished that wall, they put battens on and then put plasterboard on. And I discovered about 2 months ago that there's a wonderful draft that comes up below the floor and comes up behind that that wall. So effectively, they've created a cold wall within the house. So now I'm going to have to find a way, and I will do it, to insulate that wall, because what they've done is they've taken away a party wall and put a cold wall instead. So just when you're having work done, think all the time about insulation, because the builder might not do it. And the final step, a friend came along and did a pressure test on the house, which was really to test my the draft proofing on around the house. And that he put a big fan in the window, sucked air out of the house, and you could go around the house and feel with the back of your hand where air was coming into the house. And it was a very good step that made me realize that I thought I was good at draft proofing, but boy, can I improve on that. So I'll go around the whole house again and fill some of the holes that he had identified. So just some small steps, but sometimes the small steps are as valuable as the big costs. So I think I've probably covered most of the points I wanted to. I just wanted to emphasize that, as I was saying earlier, it doesn't matter what your motivation is for doing this work, whether it's comfort, whether it's carbon, whether it's saving money. Just get yourself a plan for your house. If you accept your motivation, the other step I'd say is take your partner with you on this journey, because you know, my wife at the moment is kind of saying, please, Martin, no more projects. Give me 6 months without a project. So so I will grant her that, because I'm a kind person like that. But also I'm ready for a break. But anyway, the work's been very motivating for me. Take your partner with you. And the final thing I'd say is get on with the work. You don't leave it for the next people who are going to be in your house, because they'll leave it to the people after that. This work needs to be done. And the other thing final thing I'd say is, if you do it, it's amazing how your neighbors come and start to ask you questions, and it motivates them to do it as well. So it has a whole street impact, because people see that if you can do it, they could consider it as well. And I think those are the major points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin. Perhaps I'll just start by asking Martin, have you had a long history of DIY, and have you got, do you feel you're a accomplished DIY person? Because I think that would be a challenge for some of us to actually embark on that type of retrofit without confidence in our own experiences.
I would say, well, I guess I've been doing DIY for a number of years, but you know, I started out with a bread knife and a lump of wood, so I wasn't trained in anything. So all I'd say is, it's amazing when you get going how you surprise yourself with what you can do. There's so much information available on the internet and YouTube to carry you through on things. So don't be afraid to try any of these things. And you know, there's always somebody who can help if you do get stuck. So yeah, okay, there's certain things I won't touch. I'm not a good plasterer, so I won't plaster. You know, I'll undertake bits of plumbing, things like that. So my answer is like any journey or any development of expertise, you don't get anywhere until you start, and when you do, you're on a road towards becoming more accomplished. And also, you start to buy the tools that will help you, because I quickly realized the bread knife wasn't enough, and you know, now I've moved on to things like circular saws. By the way, I just want to drop in something. I mentioned a lot about insulation around windows, etc. There's a great company, if you're not aware, called Miton, which is out just beyond the 505 towards Saffron Walden, and they have a warehouse full of things to do with windows. So if ever you're thinking of things like getting really good quality insulation, draft proofing materials, beyond the ones you'll see in B&Q, you can Google Miton. They've got their catalogue online, and you can get things that are really really good. So anyway,
could you give the spelling of Miton, please?
Miton is like, it's G-H-T-O-N.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. I think we have a question from Lionel, and then
Yes,
Yeah,
I've got another question. Sorry, Martin. It's very
Please.
interesting, so that's why very thought-provoking here. I was looking at the again, you were mentioning you did some DIY and looking at the level of complexity to put the insulation. I was wondering if you believe you could have installed the insulation yourself.
That's a good question. When I look at what was done, particularly on the insulation, there's the roof extension, which is more carpentry. But on the answer is yes, I could have done it. The point is that it would have taken me an awful long time, you know, because I'd have to go down, take up this big sheet of insulation. There's me, and maybe if I could find a helper, take it all the way up to the top and then drill the holes, you know, plug it in. So yes, I could have done it. It would have probably, instead of the 2 weeks it took them, it would have probably taken me at least 2 months. In the end, like I say, there's certain things that are a competency, but also there's certain things of practicality. And I just thought in that case, it's not worth it. And also I'd have then had to have got the render in. I said I can't plaster, I can't render. So there would have been these extra steps that I'd have had to get a tradesman in. So I just thought it's worth biting the bullet and getting them to do the whole job. And then with that, you get a warranty as well.
Understood. Thank you. I just have another one if I've got the time. It was about thermal bridges, especially with external wall insulation. I have heard that thermal bridges needs to be should be considered when considering external wall insulation, particularly around things like gas meter box or things like that. I don't know if that's something. Well, what is your experience around thermal bridges?
Well, like I said, I'm not an expert in this area. What frustrated me when I started to look is that it's almost like you ask 3 people and you get 4 different opinions. But one of the things that bugs me at the moment is there's not a sort of a standard view or standard specification on things. But just to give my opinion is, yes, it needs to be addressed. Yes, we did when we had some of our sills on the side of the house, windowsills, were stone, and they were then insulated. Insulation was put on before a covering was put on, and then we recreated the stone look. So yes, we were very aware of the need to avoid cold bridging, because you know what we didn't want is to find mold on our internal walls down the road, or even worse things. So yes, I would pay attention to it. But I would say as well, you do the best you can. There are limits to what you can do. You can't put on 4 inches of insulation when you've only got 2 inches or 1 inch of window frame. So you just have to try and do the best you can and look maybe for the best insulation material that you can on a narrow frame to try and avoid problems in the future.
I think David John had some questions to follow up. David John?
Yes, thank you. I was just, I had two questions, which I was going to ask was, one was quite cheekily, whilst your wife does not wish for you to do any more projects on the building, is there any other further works that you could see being done in your for your house, right, to improve the efficiency and what have you?
Well, I'll jump in there and say the front of the house, we've done the windows, which are, I would say, about 50% of the surface area, but there's still wall area there. So if we don't want to change the front of the house, we have to insulate internally. That's going to take more of an effort from me, because there's a lot of things like coving that we need to be reproduced and etc. So we're going to do that room by room. When we come to decorate a room, hopefully I'll readdress that. I've got a floor that needs insulating underneath. which the last room. And when we do that, for instance, we'll put in an electric line. So hopefully sometime down the road, if we have an electric car, we can charge it with from that line, because the electric box is in the middle of the house. So yeah, there are projects to do like that. The other major one is going to be, what do I do about mechanical, heat recovery from a ventilation system with heat recovery, because there's a lot of air that gets blown out of the house or leaked out of the house, or windows are open. We want to keep a good standard of air in the house. So that's a project that I know somebody else has done in a DIY fashion. And even if I don't do it myself, I want to think about how it could be done before moving forward on that. So yeah, there's a few projects left.
Thank you. I had a second question. Where you were saying basically about with the works that you were doing to your house, and it was kind of beginning to promote others to look at refurbishing their homes. Do you think it would have helped others, perhaps in your street, to do it as like a shared joint project, so that you could perhaps share costs or share your experiences in refurbishing your home?
Interesting. Well, yes, I mean, yeah, there is sharing obviously going on. That's an example of what we're doing here. On a personal basis, I remember when I first started to think about this and got the EcoFurb plan, I started something called Henry, which was the Hills Road Energy Reduction Initiative. And I leafleted all the people up and down the road saying, hey, I'm going on this journey. Whatever I do might not be directly applicable to you, but you might be interested to know. Of the 120 houses I leafleted, I got 7 replies. Of those, I would say three of them said, well, we did do some work on our house in 1996, and we think we might leave it until we sell the house, and then they can do it. So that's part of the reason why I'm talking about things like ripple effects of doing some work and others see the benefits of it. Is people need convincing. If you've got people locally who are already convinced, then share it with them. I'm a great believer in you get better work done if you have a discussion with someone before you start out, so that you go down the best plan. So no, I agree. I tried, and also I would say there was that effect. Our next door neighbors had their windows done in this way, and I kind of copied what the professional people had done. So there can be information sharing in lots of different ways. Cost savings. If you've got a row of houses that are all the same, then it would have been possible to get the insulation done at a much cheaper cost. But as you kind of see, we were having to tailor the solution to our house, and it might not be applicable to the one next door. So I don't know if that helps, but those are some thoughts.
That's great. Brian had some questions to follow up. Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, I was wondering, is your heating, the heating you still have, is that still from gas? And have you considered using heat pumps or an alternative way? Yeah. And has your energy usage reduced in line with expectations from all the work that you've done?
Okay, it's early days with the latest work. Because we've only just, I put the windows in starting January of this year, so I haven't really got electricity bills or whatever, or energy bills to compare. However, what I will say is when we did the original work with the underfloor insulation and especially the secondary glazing, maybe going back to an earlier point, I tracked our energy over about 7 years, and I did it every week or two and plotted it out. And I could see, I believe the figure was that it was 30% reduction in the gas costs, and the electricity I think was about 17%. And there were things as well, like LED lighting helped a lot on that. But I know the work in the past had led to a substantial reduction. It's too early to say what the effect of these will be. In terms of where we are on heating a house, it's still gas. my approach really has been, if we get the shell of the house well insulated, then the gas costs will go down. So that will affect the, our cost of heating, but to get the carbon down, we also need to go to an air source heat pump. So that's really going to be a project probably around about this soon after we've done the heat recovery ventilation. So we're probably talking about 2 years down the line.
Mm. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very, very interesting. Thank you for the presentation this evening.
Okay.
Any other follow-up questions? Lionel again?
Sorry.
Go for it,
Yes,
go for
me
it.
again. It was more about the pressure tests. Yeah, it looks like you had through a friend doing that for you. I think it could, again, bring some great information. How do you know is it a company that do you know how that could be done basically, or is it a kit that can be purchased, or what will be the best way to realize a pressure test?
Good question. I guess I can't speak on behalf of the person who did it for me, but I can inquire because he's very enthusiastic about this approach. Just to give you some idea, he basically took a radiator fan out of a sports car, stuck it in a big piece of wood, and then that goes into the window, gets sealed, and then blows air out the house. So it was very rudimentary, but it's rudimentary because he knows what he's doing. So I don't know of companies that do it. The other approach without a pressure test is, and maybe others like Nicole could correct me on this, but that there is the heat sensitive camera that is going to show you where there are cold gaps in your house. So there's different ways of solving the same problem, or at least flagging up where there are issues. But I can inquire about from the guy himself or whether he wants to do it more widely, but there's a couple of solutions there.
And Ruth had a question. Ruth.
Hello, Martin.
Hello, yes, hi.
I've got a lot of secondary glazing with magnetic bars that we went to look at your house about 15 years ago. My question is there any mileage in putting insulation between the floors? Because on the first floor, I have lodgers. When you take up the floorboards in order to do the electricity or whatever you're doing, there's a huge gap there with lots of rubble in it. And I'm thinking about zoned heating, ultimately. Is there any mileage in separating out the first floor from the ground floor?
Yeah, I mean, I wondered in the past whether I should, when I'd insulated under the floor, whether I should do it more widely. Everything I read says don't bother, partly because the air can move between areas of the house more easily than just through the floors, etc. I guess as well, the aim, at least with our house, is going to be to try and get a volume that is well insulated all around on the externally. But then I'm not in your situation in terms of lodgers and things like that. So what I'm saying is that the standard thinking is don't bother, put your money into something that can have a greater effect. But it can depend on circumstances.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And I hope you found Martin's presentation inspiring and very useful to your own thinking about what you're going to do next. Thank you all, and good night.